Also, Israel has, this is sourced by the New York Times, Israeli ground forces have passed the demilitarized zone and crossed into Syrian territory for the first time since 1973, Israeli officials say, according to the New York Times. Israeli ground forces advanced beyond the demilitarized zone on the Syria-Israel border over the weekend, marking their first overt entry into Syrian territory since the 1973 October War, according to two Israeli officials speaking anonymously to discuss sensitive developments. The Israeli deployment came amid a successful push by rebel groups in Syria to drive President Bashar al-Assad out of power and out of the country, prompting neighboring states to brace for more regional instability created by the southern fall and fight. Now, what I don't understand is Israel has collaborated on that same fucking border with al-Nusra in the past, like directly. When, what was the border scuffle that they had? Or not scuffle, but like Israel al-Nusra collaboration. Let's see. I mean, this is from Al Monitor, but this was the Israel and Jabhat al-Nusra coordinating on attacks in Syria. Israel has arrested a Syrian Druze man who documented contact between Israel and the al-Nusra front. Israel offered medical help to fighters as well. So why am I mentioning this? They have also given weapons. IDF chief finally acknowledges that Israel supplied weapons to Syrian rebels. Outgoing IDF chief of staff Gadi Eisenkot this weekend acknowledged for the first time that Israel has indeed provided weaponry to Syrian rebel groups in the Golan Heights during the country's 7-year civil war. Until Sunday, Israel would say officially only that it had given humanitarian aid to Syrian opposition groups across the border, while denying or refusing to comment on reports that it had supplied them with arms as well. So what's really interesting about this is, well, they have collaborated with al-Nusra in the past. They have collaborated with, like, HSD style groups. Okay, maybe not directly with HSD, but I would assume, HSD, HTS. What I don't understand is why, if they have collaborated with al-Nusra, and they're saying Israel Prime Minister helped topple Assad, but it wasn't planned. It just happened to be, kismet, right? And then why are they invading Syria? Why are they going further into Syria? The Israeli deployment came amid a successful push by rebel groups in Syria to drive President Bashar al-Assad out of power. Why are they doing that? If they were so worried about, the groups that come after, this is the peak. Groups that Israel has worked with, successfully collaborated with openly. They are now in charge of large swaths of the Syrian lands. So why is it that Israel now has additional security concerns? It's very interesting. One statement, two languages. There's one sentence that's pretty important that Netanyahu says, only in English, not at all in Hebrew, about the presence of IDF in the buffer zone. This is a temporary defense position until a sustainable arrangement is found.
The army, the order to take over these positions to ensure that no hostile force embeds itself right next to the border of Israel. This is a temporary defensive position until a suitable arrangement is found. Equally, we send a hand of peace. The Syrian army have
Interesting.
Israel, which borders Syria, it has deployed additional forces to the occupied Golan.
I just don't personally understand why there would be any additional temporary threats to Israeli sovereignty and security if the guys that they have in the past aligned with are now in control and Assad is gone. I thought Assad was the dangerous threat to Israel's sovereignty and security. And yet, for some reason, Israel's temporary security concerns have once again reared its ugly head. Israel always has temporary security concerns. Israel always has a right to defend itself. This is how Israel basically traffics its own expansionist policies. And that's precisely what's happening here. Anyway, from what I understand, here is obviously our Yemen researcher, Alden Markey. I don't know if he's in the chat right now. He says, now that Assad's government has officially collapsed and he has fled Syria, Yemen can now finally address in public what happened to its Syrian embassy. Assad closed the pro-Ansar Allah embassy in Damascus in October 2023 in exchange for rapprochement with Saudi Arabia. The entire embassy staff was kicked out and the embassy premises and promptly replaced with stooges of the pro-Saudi Yemeni regime in exile. I happened to speak very cordially with both of the two Yemeni ambassadors before Assad turned everything to shit. The October 2023 closure was very embarrassing and bewildering. There was no prior notice, nothing.
Golan Heights area, and during the last year is understood to have carried out several airstrikes on groups which support Hamas and Hezbollah as its wars in Gaza and then Lebanon were underway. The Israeli military is also reported to have struck Syrian military compounds near Damascus early today, including weapons depots. The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu posted these comments on the fall of the Assad regime in Syria to his social media accounts.
This is a historic day for the Middle East. The collapse of the Assad regime, the tyranny in Damascus, offers great opportunity, but also is fraught with significant dangers. This collapse is a direct result of our forceful action against Hezbollah and Iran.
I also do hate that he's so happy about this. Like, it does benefit him. Instability in the axis of resistance supply chain, regardless of Assad's like lack of interest in helping Palestinians, instability in the axis of resistance supply chain is good for Israel. So for him, this is fantastic. They've crippled Hezbollah's leadership. They've bombed every fucking Shia village in southern Lebanon. So now the Lebanese economy is already destroyed, and now they have to do a period of reconstruction to make sure that they, to make sure that that people can still survive in that area. And now, the last vector of instability, a massive country in the region that was utilized as a part of the Iranian supply chain, is no longer controlled by a guy who is somewhat unstable from his perspective.
Assad's main supporters. It set off a chain reaction of all those who want to free themselves from this tyranny and its suppression. But it also means we have to take action against possible threats. One of them is the collapse of the Separation of Forces Agreement from 1974 between Israel and Syria. This agreement held for 50 years. Last night it collapsed. The Syrian army abandoned its positions. We gave the Israeli army the order to take over these positions to ensure that no hostile force embeds itself right next to the border of Israel. This is a temporary defensive position until a suitable arrangement is found.
Soon before Erdogan's assault in Syria, Netanyahu literally threatened HasanAbi, saying he's playing with fire. Yeah, because Erdogan and Benjamin Netanyahu are this, bro. This. They are. Recep Tayyip Erdogan is a servant of Western interests. It does not matter that he plays both sides. It does not matter that he has trade relations with Russia. It doesn't matter that he has trade relations with China. Recep Tayyip Erdogan oversees the second largest military in NATO. Recep Tayyip Erdogan oversees America's nuclear arsenal in the Incirlik base. Anyone that tries to tell you that Recep Tayyip Erdogan and Benjamin Netanyahu are not directly aligned only hear what he has to say in public. And he has all the smoke for Israel in public. He always says, like, fuck you, Israel. You are Netanyahu. He says a number of different things. And yet, the oil and gas that Israel needs to power its energy grid, I believe around 30% of it still comes through Azerbaijan, through Turkish ports, directly into Israeli ports, or directly through pipelines. Okay? Israel uses a radar in Turkey to protect the sky, that too. Turkey has also always trained Israeli Air Force fighters. No matter what happens, no matter who's in charge, as long as Turkey is a NATO nation, it will always be pro-America. And obviously, America's major interests in the region are to defend Israel unconditionally. But this is very beneficial for Erdogan in general. Not only does he get to enjoy the freedom, he gets to, I don't know, bully like European allies every now and then. And also simultaneously, he gets to pummel Kurdish forces in northern Syria and maintain control over big parts of Syria. And that benefit is now playing itself out in the way that the Assad regime was toppled by Turkish-backed forces. So there it is. Recep Tayyip Erdogan has played both sides, and he has ultimately come out on top.
Equally, we send a hand of peace to all those beyond our border in Syria, to the Druze, to the Kurds, to the Christians, and to the Muslims who want to live in peace with Israel. We're going to follow events very carefully. If we can establish neighborly relations and a peaceful relations with the new forces emerging in Syria. That's our desire. But if we do not, we'll do whatever it takes to defend the state of Israel and the border.
Well, that was Benjamin Netanyahu. Well, let me go now to Charles Lister, who is in Doha. Sorry, we're going to go to our guest in a moment. First of all, let's hear from John Donaldson, who's got this analysis of Netanyahu's statement from Jerusalem.
It's funny to see cabinet ministers saying this occupied region is a security belt from Syria to the Golan Heights because the whole justification for occupying it, yeah, exactly. The whole justification for occupying and annexing the Golan Heights is that Golan Heights is a security belt for northern Israel. We're doing security belt inception. No, it's the same tactic. It's always the same tactic. You go in, you say, we have real security concerns. We have people living there. We have real security concerns. We have to push the boundary. Then you annex that boundary that you pushed. Okay? Then you repopulate that area. You repopulate the area with more settlers. Then now you have security concerns. You have to expand further. Okay? In the words of that other guy who wrote the Times of Israel article before they took it down, Lebensraum. That was literally the fucking argument that the dude was making. Yeah. Amid the chaos, the Israeli Air Force carried out numerous strikes in Syria today, taking out weaponry Israel fears could fall in the hands of hostile forces. According to the reports in Syria, strikes earlier targeted ammunition and weapons depots at the Kalkala Air Base in Suwaida, several sites in the Daraa Governorate, and the Mezeh Air Base in Damascus. This afternoon, additional strikes were reported at the Mezeh Air Base, a major security complex in the Kafr Souza suburb of the capital, a branch of the Scientific Studies and Research Center in Damascus, and a central square in the capital that includes intelligence and customs headquarters. This is from Times of Israel military correspondent Manny Fabian. Following the fall of the Assad regime, the IDF has said that it is tracking advanced weapons in Syria and working to prevent them from reaching Hezbollah or any other hostile elements that could threaten Israel. So yes, this is absolutely working in favor of Benjamin Netanyahu.
Well, look, after the last 14 months, Israel has a lot on its plate, but it is definitely concerned about what's happening in Syria. And I think basically they are saying that they are going to seize this buffer zone that has existed between the Golan Heights and occupied Golan Heights in Syria. They're going to seize those positions. And I think ordinarily that would have been seen as hugely provocative, but certainly from Israel's perspective at the moment, it is understandable. I mean,
someone look up a map of Greater Israel and you will understand which direction people are heading in. Now, if you were to say this, for the record, if you were to say this like, I don't know, 10 fucking years ago, I think that there was more of a reason to be skeptical of that. If someone were to be like, oh, they want to do Greater Israel, I'd be like, I don't know. Okay? I don't know about that. Nowadays, I feel like, I mean, look, Euphrates to the Nile. Look at that. This guy is not a random dipshit, okay? I mean, he is a dipshit, but he's not a random dipshit. That is the finance minister of Israel, Bezalel Smotrich, describing the aspirations of Greater Israel. Yes, the Nile River, in between the Nile River and the Euphrates. This is the map of Greater Israel. Sometimes you'll see this patch on soldiers' arms on the Israeli occupying force. It happens to feature most of Syria, half of Iraq, all of Jordan, all of Lebanon, parts of Turkey as well. This is what it looks like in terms of the patches. Parts of, obviously, Egypt too. Yeah. I believe it's also in the Likud Charter too. Yeah, also Saudi Arabia to a certain, Saudi Arabia too. So where does this originate from? I think it originates, I don't know. I mean, it's like the Bible, I think. I don't fucking know. For evangelical Christians, they believe that the Greater Israel, like this land between the Euphrates and the Nile River, belongs to only Jews. And when it is only populated by Jews, they will, the Armageddon will happen. Jesus Christ will come back to Megiddo and fight Satan's forces in Megiddo, and all of the evangelical Christians will be sucked into the heavens, and everyone else that is not a good evangelical Christian will burn in eternal hell. This, of course, includes the Jews, that are in between that area. But the trigger event is for them to populate this entire area so that this anime supervillain style fight can happen. Yeah. I think they're mostly focusing on their political capital on northern Gaza as far as settlements go at the moment. Some groups do photo shoots in southern Lebanon and left, but northern Gaza and the Netzadim corridor are where our eyes should aim at right now as far as that goes. Yes. I mean, I think like the reasonable thing, well, it's still unreasonable, but what they will be allowed to do is most likely populate North Gaza. As I have said, as they've shown their interest in bringing in settlers and utilizing the occupied or the currently ethnically cleansed parts of North Gaza and repopulate it with settlers. So they're already doing that. Yeah, they're very anti-Semitic. They believe half the Jews will be converted and the other half will be destroyed on Judgment Day. Yeah, I mean, one of the main guys that believes that is Pastor John Hagee, who once famously said that the Holocaust was good because it was a trigger event for Israel, and that Hitler was actually Jewish as well. He was the Antichrist and Jewish. That's what he said. Pastor John Hagee.
They are very concerned about who these rebels are. They're concerned about falling into the wrong hands, and they don't want the rebels operating right on their border. So, you know, look,
this is bullshit. They didn't have rebels operating right in their border as a concern at all before. They literally welcomed it. Okay? So the notion that they now have an issue with the rebels operating on the border is bullshit. Here is senior editor of 972 magazine, okay, Ben Reif. With Assad gone, Israeli forces are currently seizing the buffer zone between Syria and the Israeli-occupied Golan Heights, which has been in place for half a century. The army has also been instructed to occupy control points, while ministers are calling to occupy Mount Hermon. Saudi media is reporting that the Syrian side of Mount Hermon, Jabal Shaikh, is now under Israeli control. And there it is. They got the flag out and everything.
Look, Israel is fighting wars in Gaza. The one in Lebanon has only just finished, but it does seem like it's willing to engage with Syria as well. We've just had a note from the IDF warning people in 5 villages in southern Syria to stay indoors for their own safety because Israel could be preparing to make strikes there. Israel has had a very ambiguous relationship with the Syrian regime up until now, and it's one that really indicates the complex web of networks and political allegiances in the region. So for a long time, after the Arab uprising in Syria back in 2011, 2012, Israel basically wanted the status quo. They're no great friend of Bashar al-Assad, but they calculated that a man who was allied with Hezbollah, a man who was allied with Iran, Israel's 2 arguably greatest enemies, along with Hamas, they calculated that Bashar al-Assad was better than what might come next. Well, now we've got what's come next, and Israel is going to have to make the calculation of what kind of Syria it wants, and if they don't get the Syria they want, how will they respond?
Bombing Damascus, taking a photo with the Israeli flag on Syrian territory is a provocative way to greet the new regime on its first day. I assume that Israeli decision makers have already calculated that they can't have peace with any regime in Syria and are sending a message. I mean, I think they're just flexing. How the fuck does a whole ass country fall in a single week? I mean, it was already held together with ticker tape, if that makes sense. It wasn't, there has always been, at least for the past decade, there's been like a very strong, resilient anti-government movement in the country. There's a shit ton of Western efforts, Western involvement that propped up some of these groups and armed them. You have a massive country that is a border nation to you, and I'm not even talking about Israel here, that has also consistently utilized its own militia forces inside of your borders.
Moments ago,
we're gonna see what the CNN crew said in Syria
Clarissa
after the
and her
Assad
team
regime
spoke
fell.
to us from inside the Syrian capital of Damascus. Here is some of what she told us.
It's a little bit eerie, certainly, and there's definitely a sense when you talk to people that they're delighted, but they're cautious, they're concerned. What comes next? Will there...
Yeah. Why are they cautious and concerned?
Be chaos? Will there be lawlessness? Will we see more looting like we saw today? But if you have that other clip pulled up, I just would love our viewers to be able to see the scene at that border crossing as we pass through it. Again, it was already dark, already past curfew, very, very quiet.
An HTS militant in Damascus says we will declare an Islamic caliphate and pledge allegiance to the Muslim caliph in order to fight the Jews. Yeah, right, dude. Sure. There's got to be someone who's like pro-Assad that's claiming that. And I don't mean that they're not like anti-Semitic or whatever. I'm sure plenty are. But they will never, I don't think they'll fight Israel at all. You're out of your fucking mind if you think that they're going to fight Israel. Once again, Israel has strategically offered support to al-Nusra in the past. That's just not a real thing.
Quiet and just nothing like we've seen it before. The only real evidence we saw, Wolf, of any struggle to finally take Damascus, to finally oust Bashar al-Assad, was a tank in the road below a torn poster of President, or I should say former President Bashar al-Assad. Take a look at that clip if you can. So we're just crossing now into Syria. It's astonishing to see. It's absolutely empty. The border points before, there would have been soldiers, there would have been border guards. Now there is absolutely nobody from the Syrian regime. Just a few friendly people waving us through. And honestly, the last time I came down this road was back in 2011. I was leaving Syria. I had been undercover in Damascus, posing as a tourist, went back into Lebanon, and I never went.
The chief of staff of the Israeli occupation forces, Herzi Halevi, announced that starting Sunday night, the IOF will begin combat operations in Syria. Aldon Markey says Jelani now has a chance to prove the national character of himself and his forces. No. And this would be tremendously beneficial for him. If he wants regional recognition, look at what the Ansar Allah administration got in terms of positive coverage from the entire region because of their blockade on the Red Sea and because of their military campaign against Israel. If there is no easier way to gain immediate legitimacy other than in the region, other than attacking Israel immediately, the reality of the matter is he will not do that. He just will not. There is no way, even if it would be beneficial for them, it would ultimately be very harmful for them if their interest is to control Syria. America will never allow a hostile entity to control Syria.
Imagine this moment would come when we would be driving through this border with no one from the regime to stop us. And Wolf, my cameraman, Scott McWhinney, just found this on the ground, literally, as we were listening to that clip. This is the old flag of the Syrian regime, which has 2 green stars. The rebels' flag has 3 green stars, but this one has now been, literally, we just found it on the floor. I guess a real moment where you see how much things have changed just in the past 24 hours. In terms of the security situation on the streets, I would just add, we anticipated that we might see quite a lot of checkpoints as we came into the city. We didn't. We did see a group of men. They did not appear to be armed, but they asked us what we were doing, where we were going. And now that we are sort of ensconced in our place where we're staying for the night, we have seen a couple of patrols. I saw 2 men armed, and I went up to them and asked them where they were from. They told me they were from Idlib, which is in the northern part of the country. And we saw a man on the street go up and wanted to pose for a photograph of them, which I think sort of speaks to the moment. There is obviously jubilation, elation, but also this sense of you can't compute. It was so fast, so breathtaking. It's astonishing. And I think people are taking some time to try to process the magnitude. Keep in mind, Wolf, we're talking about 53 years of Assad rule, 53 years of a brutal police state. And I can't tell you how many Syrians have said to me, Wolf, that, you know, we understand that there are concerns about the rebels and the makeup of the rebels and the fact that some of them are Islamists and some of them are even jihadists or have been affiliated with Al-Qaeda or prescribed organizations. But let us have this moment. Let us celebrate the fact that this brutal dictator who has ruthlessly killed hundreds of thousands of people, who has gassed children with lethal nerve agents, who has...
Syrian rebel commander urges Israel to support uprising, strike Iran-backed forces. In an interview with Tal, a fierce Syrian army officer expresses hope for friendly relations with Jewish state, warns of Iranian militias propping up Assad. They will come for Israel too. Yeah, anyone that thinks that these guys are going to fucking attack Israel, at least in the next 4 to 5 years, are crazy, in my opinion. I think, like, at most, this will be like a 9/11 style situation against America, more likely, and maybe even Israel, perhaps. Right? But I do not foresee this. I do not foresee this becoming a immediate, like, oh, we took control over Syria, and now we're going to use that control to, like, attack Israel. Yeah. All right, let's continue.
Locked people in prisons and tortured and beaten them to death, that he is finally gone. And that whatever may come and whatever the anxiety, this is a new chapter for Syria, Wolf.
Clarissa Ward now having made her way to Damascus, the Syrian capital. Clarissa, thank you very much. I want to bring in CNN's international diplomatic editor, Nick Robertson, right now. He's done a lot of reporting from Syria and the Middle East over the years. Nick, what do we know, first of all, about this transition of power in Syria right now?
Yeah, risk and opportunity is sort of the way that President Biden spoke about it in his speech there. He mentioned being vigilant, and he said that because we've heard, he said, what the rebel leadership who had its roots in Al-Qaeda, we've heard what they're saying. It sounds like it's good. They're talking about a non-sectarian society with a new political dispensation. And this is something that President Biden said they need to live up to. We've heard the words, but we need to see more. And what President Biden laid out that he expects is in the future is a Syria that's sovereign and independent, which seems to be a very clear message, crystal clear. Russia and Iran will no longer have any kind of stake in the future of Syria. So that's part of the political picture going forward. It's made up of the different ethnic groups. It's made up of the different religious groups. It's made up of all the different elements of society inside of Syria. That's President Biden's aspiration. And that's very much what we've been hearing from the rebels. And I've been talking to actually a political grouping way outside of the rebel structure who were central to peace talks back with Assad's regime. And about a decade ago, the United States was playing a role in that. And there was a lot of work laid out back then for what a new government could look like, what a new constitution could look like, who could be involved in it. And this political leader told me that's the direction he believes that the country is headed in again, a period of military security, the military pull back. There's a power-sharing government for a period of time, 6 to 9 months, perhaps, he outlined, and then elections. And this really fits in with what President Biden was saying, that this new Syria will have a new constitution. Some of that's been drafted in the past, and a new government, the plans to get that new government and achieve it have been made there. But President Biden being very clear that ISIS will not be allowed to fill a vacuum. U.S. strikes on ISIS today. The security...
No. The other ISIS will not. If you're reformed ISIS, then you're fine.
U.S. forces vitally important, but also making sure that ISIS doesn't get stronger, and remembering that there are hundreds and thousands of ISIS families and supporters in jails inside of Syria today, in the rebel-held areas in the east, that the United States supports and helps keep them controlled. That will be vital to oversee going forward, and that is going to be of strategic importance to the United States. So that's the path that he's setting out. The rebels are setting out a path of change, no longer brutality, political, religious plurality.
Nick, I want you and our viewers to listen to what the rebel leader who led this revolt against Bashar al-Assad's regime said just a short time ago. Listen to this.
This victory, my brothers, is a victory for the entire Islamic nation. This new triumph, my brothers, marks a new chapter in the history of the region, a history fraught with dangers. Leaving Syria as a playground for Iranian ambitions, spreading sectarianism, stirring corruption, it became the world's leading source of Captagon. But today, Syria is being purified by the grace of God Almighty and through the efforts of the Arogue Mujahideen.
So, Nick, does that speech give us some insight on what could happen next now that these rebel groups are in control?
Yes, it does. You would expect, and this is what we've heard here, in any speech, he's essentially going to thank his supporters, which is the Islamist fighters who've been part of this coalition of rebel groups. And that's what he said. This is, and let's not forget the context of where he was. This is in this mosque, the Umayyad Mosque, is in the heart of Damascus. It's an ancient and frankly very beautiful building in old stone, and it is sort of, if you will, the one place you would expect him to go and give a speech for an Islamist leader in the most venerated mosque in Syria. In that context, he speaks to the people who got him to power and got him to Damascus. But he also speaks about no longer for Iran to have an interest. I think that very clearly sort of talks and speaks to the negative interference that he sees Iran has played in Syria, but also to its Shia faith. He's a Sunni.
It'll never not be funny to me that the media was so quick to be like, Hamas is ISIS. But then when you have literally ISIS guys, they're like, those guys are no longer ISIS. They're rebels. They're moderate rebels, former jihadi rebels. It's like, it's a super simple mechanism. It's like enemy, bad guy. Friend, good guy. It doesn't matter.
There's a difference. But when he speaks about Captagon, that's a message to leaders in the region. Captagon, the drug, has been an absolutely pernicious and deadly impact on the countries in the region, from Jordan to Saudi Arabia. They all want to see an end to that production. It's damaging their societies. The money of it's kept Assad in power. And when he says that, what Jelani is doing is speaking to the leaders in the region who will help continue to keep him in power. So he's talked to the people that have brought him to a place of power, and he's talking regionally to those who he hopes can help keep him in power, Wolf.
And this new group, this group, HTS, not necessarily a new group, but clearly a very powerful group right now, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, is in charge. They've taken over for Bashar al-Assad's regime. Nick Robertson reporting for us. Thank you very, very much.
Breaking news on Syria, and this time related to Israel. And Israeli airstrikes are being reported by Reuters saying...
This is a real brave Mujahideen moment. It's crazy. All right.